Please return to the Doc Greene Show. This is Marvin the Martian. When you miss it, you make me very, very angry.
The doctor will see you now.
Oh, yeah, I do see you out there. I'm kind of like Santa Claus. I see you when you're sleeping. You're awake. Anyway, I see you're out there checking out the news right now. And under the heading of revenge is a dish best served cold, Donald Trump has turned the tables on Fani Willis. That's right, Fanny's got her fanny in a crack right now because Donald Trump is seeking $6.3 million from Fulton County in connection with the dismissed case against him, which was made up and created by former DA Fani Willis. As you know, Willis indicted Donald Trump under the racketeer, influenced, and corrupt organization laws, which means she just made up a bunch of garbage, threw it on a wall, and hoped it would stick. She was pretty certain with the Biden Justice Department they could get away with any sort of injustice. Well, the case was eventually dismissed because, A, there was no evidence, and B, it turned out Fani Willis was basically using federal funds and state funds in order to pay her lover to take her to different places around the world and be sweet to her. Well, it's all coming home to roost now. The court has ruled there's a significant appearance of impropriety, and her office is completely disqualified. Willis, of course, appealed the decision, but she lost. This paved the way for a motion to recoup $6.3 million in attorney's fees and a motion that cited Georgia law that says when a DA is dismissed, the defendant in the case shall be entitled to a payout. You see, when Democrats elect Democrats or appoint them to federal offices or state offices, and then they do what Democrats do, it ends up coming back and biting the taxpayer on the butt. Now, I've said this before. Not all criminals are Democrats, but all Democrats are criminals. You can be sure of that because they've never met a criminal they didn't love and never met a baby they didn't want to kill. That's just who these people are. In a 3-page motion filed Wednesday by attorney Steve Sadow representing Donald Trump, it included 200 pages of attachments breaking down the cost for which Trump wishes to be reimbursed. They argue that the law mandates such recovery when a prosecuting attorney is disqualified, and we know that's true. Each of the necessary elements has been met. District Attorney Willis was disqualified because of her improper conduct. Therefore, the criminal case was dismissed because it was all made up garbage to begin with, and the motion was filed in a timely manner. The motion noted that Donald Trump's co-defendants can and should also file for reimbursement. Donald Trump adopted the motions for attorney fees and costs filed by his co-defendants. He will do so in a separate pleading after all such motions are filed. The statute said that when the prosecutor is disqualified due to improper conduct, like using state and federal funds to pay for your lover to carry you around the world and feed you good food and be nice to you in different places, well, that's just bad. So any defendant against whom such charges are dismissed shall be entitled to an award, and that would be Donald John Trump. So the case was rightfully dismissed, and now the taxpayer is going to pick up the tab because they allowed a criminal to become the district attorney of Fulton County, Florida. Fani Willis was entirely working with the Biden administrators or whoever is handling President Otto Penn. We know that her lawyer, her boyfriend, actually billed 1,600 hours a week. Add that up, doesn't quite work, does it? And he went to Washington, D.C. and billed there for working 24 hours a day while he was in Washington, D.C., meeting with whoever was running President Otto Penn. So we hope that Donald Trump gets the fat check because, let's face it, the man deserves it. On an entirely different note, Conan Obrien, of course, is a well-known comedian. He used to do late night. I don't know about you. I don't even watch network TV, so I really have no idea. But this is to invite you to think about a single word, any word that defines modern liberalism, and then, having thought of that word, go ahead and imagine its effect on comedy. Consider the sage advice of longtime comedian Conan Obrien, who recently warned his peers that their intense anger toward President Donald Trump, otherwise known as Trump derangement syndrome, has absolutely undermined their craft. He said, "You're being co-opted. According to X on his social media platform, Conan O'Brien made those comments Tuesday during an interview with the Oxford Union. He said, some comics just go the route, I'm just going to say F Trump all the time, and that's their comedy. Well, I think now a little bit you're being co-opted because you're so angry, you've been lulled into believing something that's not true. You know, it's like a siren leading you into the rocks. You've been lulled just saying F Trump, F Trump, F Trump, screw this guy. I think you've now lost your best weapon, which is just being funny, and you've exchanged it for uncontrollable anger. And of course, no one should mistake O'Brien for being a Trump supporter. He certainly is not, but he did hit the nail on the head. These anti-American propagandists like Stephen Colbert, Jimmy Kimmel, and Jimmy Fallon, they have failed miserably because they have substituted Trump derangement syndrome for actual comedy. This might make some people laugh, but not a lot of them. You've got to remember, once again, according to the real surveys that are out there, Democrats now have support levels somewhere around 13%. 13%. We now have 70+% of Americans that support Donald Trump and what he is doing. So if that's all you can do is denigrate Donald Trump, what's that do to your audience? Any person would say, well, things are a little too serious now. I don't need to be funny, O'Brien said. Well, I think if you're a comedian, you always need to be funny. You just have to find a way, and you have to find a way to channel that anger. That is, because good art will always be a great weapon. I'll give you a perfect example. This is only going to work for some of you older guys, but there was a comedian named George Carlin. And George Carlin was a very angry man. Very angry man. But he was funny. And he made his anger funny. He was really good at it. So just keep that in mind. You can be funny. You can be angry and still be funny. So Conan O'Brien said, if you're just screaming and you're just angry, you've lost the best tool in your entire toolbox. So this leads to the key question. Do most modern leftist Marxist comedians even understand what humor really is? And I would say probably no. I'd say they're products of the public indoctrination system. Some of you probably call it public school. Think of the kind of people that have made you laugh in the past, though. Have you ever sensed that any of them lacked the capacity for self-deprecation? And if you had sensed that about them, would you have found them funny? Now, remember the word that you chose to define modern leftist liberalism Marxist? I choose the word smugness. Do smug people who cannot laugh at themselves make good comedians? No, I'd say not. Do TDS afflicted leftists change the course of history? They could if they listened to Mr. O'Brien, but then they would have to surrender the very thing that they have allowed to define themselves, namely their hatred of Donald Trump. And that qualifies as a task that's easier said than done. After all, at least one mental health professional who sees patients on a regular basis has classified Trump derangement syndrome as a genuine pathology. So in short, Conan O'Brien had it right. But don't expect Colbert and Kimmel and their ilk to suddenly discover comedy. The truth is, we all love comedy. We need to laugh. We need to be able to laugh at ourselves. And yes, maybe even laugh at Donald Trump from time to time. But I got to ask you this. Has anyone ever done more for America than President Donald Trump has? And if you're going to tell me somebody else, I expect you to be able to name some things they've done because I've analyzed it. Ronald Reagan, considered to be the greatest Republican president ever, who won in a landslide, really didn't achieve that much when he was president. He did the best he could, but he didn't achieve much. The Bush, 1 and 2, no, absolutely not. They were both part of the globalist cabal. They did absolutely nothing to advance the cause of America in the world. Only Donald Trump that I can see, going all the way back to Rutherford B. Hayes, only Donald Trump has done the things for America that needed to be done. And I think instead of making jokes about him and saying horrible, vulgar things about him, I think that we ought to pray for him, and I think we ought to enjoy, and I think we ought to thank Yeshua, the mighty God in Christ, that we got this great man in our lifetime. Some of you may remember the pop singer Joy Villa, and she has always been very pro-Donald Trump. Well, she recently penned a lengthy essay for Ebby magazine acknowledging the truth. She said, "It's important to acknowledge that I have left the lie of Scientology and become a born-again Christian." She said, "I didn't enter Scientology because I was a lost nobody looking for relevance. I entered as a driven, faith-raised woman searching for truth, healing, and purpose. I was raised a Christian. I love Jesus, and Scientology told me that I could keep him. But that lie kept me inside for 15 years. She said, right off the bat, it's worth noting that the idea of having Jesus and Scientology in your life is a blatant lie. It is an anachronism. It is a paradox. In fact, the Bible makes this abundantly clear. Galatians 1:8, the Apostle Paul plainly states, "But even if we or an angel from heaven should preach a gospel different than the one that we preach to you, let them be under God's curse." That would be anathema. In Matthew 6:24, Jesus said, "No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. You can't serve both God and money." Yes, the Matthew passage is explicitly talking about money, but it's actually incredibly appropriate if we're speaking about Scientology. Numerous critics and former members of Scientology have often spoke out against the bizarre obsession with money in this, we'll call it a pseudo-religion. And Joy Villa's experience was no different. She said, "By the time I had left, I'd already donated them nearly $2 million. But I'd given my time, my labor, my voice, my platform, and my influence. And I lived at the Celebrity Center in Hollywood for years and trained at the highest levels. I became one of their most visible success stories as a successful actress and singer." Joy Villa acknowledged that she experienced career heights that most artists can only dream of. Just one glaring catch: Scientology took credit for all of that. Every achievement was not attributed to God, not to talent, not to perseverance, but to loyalty to the organization. My success became nothing more than propaganda. My life became marketing. It's a control system, she explained. Working 12-hour days, mentally depleted, spiritually numb, emotionally unraveling, I was deeply depressed. In fact, I was so depressed, I did not want to live anymore. I didn't want to die, but I didn't want to live. I was spiritually bankrupt. She made it crystal clear that Christianity is what works. Scientology cannot coexist with Christianity, just like nothing else can really coexist with Christianity. You either love Jesus or you don't. Hey, see you guys on Monday.
That's all, folks.